Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at one of the most deadly and optimal builds in Elden Ring, and that's going to be the Power Stance Coated Swords. We'll be going over the build in more detail at the end of the video, but just briefly we'll be using the Coated Swords. We also have the option to switch over to Ordovis's Greatsword, which can be a nice way to finish our opponent using the Hyper Armor of the Ash of War. We also have the Blasphemous Blade, the Black Knife, as well as Marcus Hammer, and then we do have some great bows on hand, which can be very helpful in invasions. That's everything that I wanted to cover in the intro. Let's go ahead and take a look at the invasion content, and if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump in and see how these do. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we are going to be riding the elevator down into an area with a host, a phantom, as well as a blue. And we did have uplifting aromatic active, so that allowed us to just tank one hit. It's definitely nice to utilize something like that if you're going to be kind of coming down an elevator into an area that you don't really know what's coming. So we do land our Ash of War through the wall, and that's going to be really useful to use that technique to just kind of surprise our opponents. We'll be able to, clip through a wall. And here we see the blue doesn't really manage to land their Bloodhound Fang attack and does fall into the giant hole in the ground that they left after sending that elevator back up. So that's going to be pretty important, and if you do send an elevator up, it does often leave a vacancy. So we're going to try to incorporate that here, and we do manage to knock our other opponent into that hole as well and come out on top with two nice gravity kills. Next up, we're going to be invading a host that is running a casting build, and they are rune-arced, so they're a little bit more tanky than usual, and they also have two phantoms in the world. So they climb up this elevator, and we immediately begin applying some pressure. We go for a jumping attack as we come down. It's worth noting that you do have a hitbox on your Power Stance straight swords as they kind of come down, although you'll likely only hit with one rather than both unless you land directly on your opponent. So at this point, we do see that the host is using a Carrion Slicer, so we use Barrier of Gold to just kind of negate some of that magic damage, and for something like Carrion Slicer, it can be really nice to have Barrier of Gold on hand. So we go from kind of one similar looking area into another, and the host kind of channels the brave Sir Robin from Monty Python and the Holy Grail and completely abandons both phantoms to just hang out in this pit with me. And I begin applying a pressure to the phantom with the shield because the other one is playing a little bit more passively and is really just going for the poison dagger. So it is annoying to have that kind of added pressure of poison, but I'm trying to go for just a double heal and get some pressure on the player with the Great Shield. And here I go for a knowledge check and use Unblockable Blade as the Ash of War kind of signifies it's not blockable, so it does go through shields, which is extremely nice. It's something like Piercing Fang, which is really effective on shields, and if you don't know that you're dealing with that, then you may not roll and just assume that you're going to be able to block it. So here I switch over to my shield. I was hoping to get a parry on this player, but didn't manage to pull it off, so quickly readjust and get my sword back out. And this player is really into their running attack, so that is a very strong move on the Nagakiba, and I do not such a great job as they kind of come around this corner in a moment, and they use that kind of blind spot against me to land that hit, which is pretty nice. But now I know their play style, so I get ready to go for a parry. I don't want to pull out my parry shield too quickly, so I wait until I think it's a good moment, grab that parry shield, then switch over to a Misericord and get the riposte and finish off that phantom. And that's kind of just in time because a blue comes into the world, and as I'm trying to kind of set back to neutral, the blue does deliver quite a bit of damage with a couple hits with the sword as well as their Ash of War, and now I can kind of reset again as they're low on stamina, and I can go after them with the Power Stance straight sword. So kind of the play style surrounding the Power Stance straight swords is very much like wait for your opportunity and then really go at it when you have that opportunity. So the blue here is doing a good job of kind of zoning. They're trying to give themselves some space to heal by filling up that area with kind of that pile of magma, but it doesn't work out so well. I do manage to jump over it, and then they get kind of trapped in a corner. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit as we now go after this host who spends a little time trying to figure out how to get up the ladder. Think they're on the wrong side, but they're not really aware of that. So they do eventually figure it out, and I begin throwing some fan daggers now that I've applied my Barrier of Gold, just so that I'm in a slightly better position to deal with any incoming Carrion Slicer attacks or magic attacks, because a rune-arced host, especially at meta level, can do massive amounts of damage with some particular spells if they hit you. So I'd say better safe than sorry, and realize that they don't really have enough time to get up the ladder before I can fan dagger them down. And here I switch over to a heavy thrusting sword, and when you're going for chase downs, I definitely recommend switching over to a thrusting sword of some sort, especially when you're not sure if another blue is going to be coming into the world, or if you're just trying to roll catch with a weapon that's not so great at roll catching. So eventually we do manage to kind of get them in a corner and come out with the W. Next up, we have a group of 3. It looks to me like they were ganking. This is kind of a common ganking area just because there's not a lot of PvE, there's not a lot of cover, and everybody's running Barrier of Gold. So I'm able to land just a couple quick hits before the Vike's Spear is able to complete its Ash of War and just kind of knock them out of the air with it. So that was pretty nice there. And then the player with the Giant Crusher is going for a very slow telegraphed attack, and it really just leaves them susceptible to a backstab. So I get quite a bit of damage there, but they do have a second to reset and heal, and now I need to make sure that I don't die in this corner, but do get the rest of the damage off that was necessary to finish off the player with the Giant Crusher. And then here my opponent goes for a quick step and tries to backstab me, but I kind of pull a reverse Uno card and backstab them, and then get the wake up with the Coated Sword Ash of War. And if you time it right, it's pretty powerful as a wake up, just because the area that it can kind of sweep through is quite large, and the fact that it goes through walls is really nice, but it does have a very short window for that hitbox, so you have to be pretty precise with your timing. So next up we have a 3v1, and I am trying to bait them to be a little bit more aggressive. So I do end up going for a through the wall attack with the Nox Flowing Hammer, and then you could say that mimicry is the biggest form of flattery, so we see them switch over to the Nox Flowing Hammer as well, and I'm absolutely chuffed. And they begin going for some more aggressive attacks. So kind of the plan worked, and they are getting very aggressive. They have Waves of Gold, they have Rivers of Blood, but I have Power Stance Coated Swords, so it's pretty much a fair fight at this point. I'm really trying to use corners to my advantage and just wait for a good moment to deliver burst damage, because that's really your best bet when you have a 3v1. I realize that they haven't followed me at this point, and I do kind of run back hoping to get them to be aggressive again. I think it was kind of a smart play to just kind of hang out in this Warming Stone, but I figure they're not going to run out of it, so I switch over to Black Blade, or the Black Knife rather, and using that Ash of War is a nice way to just kind of negate some of the HP that they've gotten back, and then just kind of piss everybody off enough so that they'll run after me again. And that proves to be effective. I almost get stuck in a corner, but do manage to land a jumping neutral attack that is enough to kill one of the phantoms there. So they got a little bit low on health, and they didn't get out of there fast enough, and then the Coated Swords just do so much damage so fast that I'm able to end the one of the phantoms there. So we do have some more bleed coming our way, so we try to, again, bait our opponents into being aggressive. Having something like a Great Bow on hand can be extremely useful, and if you see a player using a shield, it's going to really be beneficial to try to hit them on the ground behind the shield. So that's really where I'm aiming. I'm hoping that the AoE of those golem arrows hits behind the shield and pushes them forward. Otherwise, the shield will block that damage. So just kind of a trick there that I picked up during my Sterling Archer cosplay build, and a technique that I definitely recommend. Here, I kind of get caught on the corner. One of those little pillars, though, can definitely catch you. So I do take some damage, but don't get fully rot procced. So I was pretty happy about that. And then I do get a couple quick hits in with the Power Stance Coated Swords, and now the Phantom here is playing just a little bit too aggressively. They were really hoping to poise break me, but the Power Stance Straight Swords were too fast and they weren't running enough poise, and that's just part of the reason it's really important to be running a high poise build, especially if you're going to be playing against, 3 players at the same time, and especially if you're running a weapon with lower poise damage like these Power Stance Straight Swords. So a blue does come into the world right as we kill that Phantom, and I end up in a pretty optimal spot because I've got some backup from this Archer, and they're going to just be continuously applying pressure, and it's kind of unclear, unless you're familiar with the PvE of this area, where that damage is actually coming from, and I think that they were probably a little bit confused. It's pretty obvious if you're coming from the other direction, but since I brought them in out of that hallway, they couldn't really see where those arrows were coming from. The PvE is kind of far away, and they're just absolutely wrecking this blue. So I was pretty happy to see that, and having a little bit of help from some PvE that's not hurting me is, always nice to see. And at this point, I, make a split-second decision that I'd rather go for the blue than the host. And even though I've killed 2 phantoms already, it might be nice to, risk the fog wall and just keep this invasion going a little bit longer. So I have switched over to my heavy thrusting sword, and that's mostly because I'm in the presence of somebody that will potentially be casting. So they are running Moonlight Greatsword, which is a dead giveaway that they're running an intelligence build, and I'm able to punish a heal with the Sacred Blade Ash of War, which is extremely useful for punishing heals. And eventually the rot does kill 1 blue, but just in time another blue does come into the world. So we're kind of keeping the party going, and we are poisoned at this point, and I'm not totally sure what happened there. I'm not sure if that was like extreme latency or something, but I do get hit pretty hard, and at this point accidentally I killed a host before the blue, but I do manage to get the blue at the very end there. So that was a nice group that really just all fell susceptible to the power stance straight swords, and just it's kind of a dead giveaway about how strong these are. And for that reason, I won't be really incorporating this a duel showcase into this build, just because these aren't super fun to play against in duels, and they're very short usually. And I thought the invasion content would be more interesting and a little bit more balanced for just kind of the raw power associated with this weapon. So we now have a 3v1, and Giant's Flame Take Thee is going to be a theme throughout this particular invasion, and it's really just kind of all that Phantoms got in terms of their plan. So it's pretty effective. It can be very difficult to pressure one player when you're worrying about the incoming massive damage from Giant's Flame Take Thee, but I do decide to go for the chase down on 1 Phantom with the claws, and I'm able to finish them, but kind of at the expense of eating another Giant's Flame Take Thee. So definitely worth the trade since I got the heals, but it's something to look out for. And if your timing is imprecise, then you might not, be able to chase down that last Phantom, and you'll just eat a Giant's Flame Take Thee. So not sure what happened there. I definitely often would have rolled, and we do see the host now pull out the dual Naginatas. So definitely high damage potential between these 2 players with the Giant's Flame Take Thee and the Cross Naginatas. Eventually I am able to kind of wear out the player with the Giant's Flame Take Thee, and I think at this point they were out of FP, so they did have to switch over to a different setup. And that was, really what I was hoping for. You can't spam an incantation like that forever, so I did skip ahead a little bit, but that's always a good plan to have if, they're going for something that is that high damaging, and that FP consumption it's just going to make sense to not really play into it, not get chipped too much in the process. And we do finally take care of that Phantom and begin the chase down on the host. So they run all the way down here. I use Uplifting Aromatic. I'm pretty confident that they're down here, so I send the elevator back up. And Uplifting Aromatic was kind of the difference maker here, because they did surprise me as they popped out of this corner with their Cross Naginatas. And then here I'm able to just poise through one of their hits and win out on the trade with the Power Stance Straight Sword. So that was kind of a hard-fought 3v1, and I was definitely happy to come out with the W, and we can really just appreciate how strong this particular weapon is on a build like this. It's also worth mentioning that I didn't really go for any offensive incantations, and that's another way to just add a whole other dimension of extremely damaging weapons to your arsenal. I found that these were pretty much strong enough, and I didn't really need something ranged, but obviously you could run Giant's Flame Take Thee on a build like this. You have very high faith, so it would do a ton of damage, but Power Stance Coated Swords was good enough for me. Here we can see in this invasion, I kind of use this hill as a way to block any potential incoming spells that might come my way while I go for a turn and burn on the Phantom, and that proves to be pretty effective. And then I switch from chasing down the host to just going after this other Phantom here with the heavy thrusting sword, and I do try to wait for my moment. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, that's really the main play style, is you can kind of bait your opponents into situations where they might have low stamina, or you'll just win out on a trade. So if you can roll into an attack and then go for a neutral jump and maybe miss the incoming damage and land a jumping attack, and then following that up with another L1, it's just going to be absolutely crushing. So that's kind of the play style that comes with these particular weapon, and we do have a host that just kind of gives up there after their second phantom dies. So that is part of the reason I think that these weapons are somewhat infamous. Like, definitely people will not be happy to see you running these. I wanted to give it a try because the game's been out for over a year and I've never tried them, but I can see why people don't really like them. And having played with them, like, it's useful for understanding the weapon a little bit better, but it's not something I'll be incorporating in my daily life, especially not in the arena too much or anything like that. So next up we have another 3v1, and it's really kind of a dance around this wall. We both have options to kind of do damage through the wall. So they've got the Cannon of Hyema, which, will do quite a bit of damage if I don't manage to roll it. And then I think that player with the Nagakiba did manage to land their running heavy attack through the wall. So I was kind of surprised about that there, but, whatever, it worked for them. Here I decide not to kill the host and go for another L1, but rather go for the Phantom first. So they are running another power stance build. They've got the power stance curved swords, which are also pretty deadly, especially the Wing of Estelle. It's very hard to play against a good Wing of Estelle player. They have a ton of priority because of the poise damage on their heavy attacks and the range on their heavy attacks, since you get that little projectile. But fortunately, this player is going for more of the L1 technique, and had they been going for more of the heavy attacks, I think I would have had a more difficult time dealing with them. But eventually we do begin the chase down on the host here, and we go for a running L1. Now, this can be nice as a roll catch, especially if your opponent's low on health. And we switch over to Ordovis's Greatsword just because the Ash of War is such a good roll catch, and you do get hyper armor. So it's kind of a situation where you're between a rock and a hard place when you're dealing with that at low health, because if you play aggressively, your opponent will just hyper armor through whatever attack you bring at them, because that particular Ash of War has a ton of hyper armor. And then if you play passively, it's very easy to just get clipped by kind of that lasting hitbox of the Ash of War of Ordovis's Greatsword. So that was a nice moment there where we could use that as kind of a wake up to a roll catch and just grab the kill without too much difficulty. Next up we have another group, and they are using some Madness incantations as well as Vike's Spear. So I did at the beginning switch over my talismans just so I'd have a little bit more breathing room when it comes to the Madness buildup. And then here again we can use Ordovis's Greatsword, where normally I would have gotten stunned from the attack that the host was going for, but the hyper armor associated with that Ash of War was too strong, and I was able to come out on top there. Next up, we have an invasion where we kind of hop down and grab a nice jumping attack, and just landing that surprise jump attack was enough to kill that Phantom there, and we're able to get out of there not unscathed, but we are able to reset to neutral with one player down. So having kind of that surprise attack was extremely useful. And now we do need to be wary of the potential gravity attacks that our opponent has. So the host is using the Radon swords, which means, if you get caught with it in the wrong direction, you can potentially just fly off a cliff. So it's good to, bear that in mind, but they are out of FP at this point, so they don't manage to kill the PvE, and we can kind of begin the chase down. It's very low pressure for me, very high pressure for them, so I can really take my time, kind of be patient. And they did restore their FP, but they do leave themselves open to a backstab, so we're able to get the kill there just in between the first and second part of that Ash of War. Next up, we have another invasion where we're gonna buff ourselves just a little bit coming into it. It is a 3v1, so we do need to be careful about that. And these giant flowers, I feel like, are great companions when you're invading in this area, just because they take up so much space, which means like they can kind of block projectiles that your opponents might send your way. And if your opponents are trying to lock and unlock onto you, sometimes they'll lock onto the flowers by accident, so that can be really useful. And just the fact that it has kind of a AoE of poisonous mist that players don't want to run towards, that can be helpful. Lastly, they are extremely tanky, so they're hard to kill. So that's really useful for, just having some PvE in the area that can be kind of a distraction. So I'm kind of trying to bait them into it, and then also just, seeing who's going to be interested in following me kind of into this area that spells doom. and we do end up getting one player to be aggressive when really they shouldn't have, and then I'm able to land my Ash of War and really utilize the range of that Ash of War to clip my opponent and turn this 2v1 into just a 1v1. And we skipped ahead a little bit just because there was just kind of some messing around. I think I went for a couple parry attempts that didn't pan out, and eventually we let our opponent go for some kind of stamina draining attacks and do come out on top there. So not too difficult to take care of that last player, and we can kind of move on to the next invasion, which is a 3v1 in Castle Sol. And this invasion sequence is going to be almost exclusively 3v1s. Just there are so many 3v1s that normally would have been pretty difficult, but with how quickly you can turn them into a 2v1 with, you know, just kind of the ridiculous burst damage of Power Stance Coated Swords, it's just, it makes your life a lot easier as an invader. So we do manage to knock that player off our checklist here and begin the chase down on the host, this player, or the Phantom rather. And they are light rolling, but we do manage to clip them with just a kind of delayed L1. And that's kind of the name of the game when you're running a build like this. The Power Stance straight swords are really good when you are able to delay your attacks. So just being patient with them is really going to pay off. You know, extremely delayed jumping attacks are very strong, especially because you can, you know, switch it up and go for non-delayed jumping attacks. And between those two things, it's just, it adds so much pressure to your opponent. And then switching over to the Ordovis Greatsword, we begin going for that Ash of War, and we can, you know, utilize that hyper armor again and just the potential for a roll catch, and it does kind of take care of that host there. So moving on to our next invasion, I'm laughing just a little bit because we get a nice knowledge check on the player with the shield using Unblockable Blade, and the host wasn't really into that, so they just kind of counter us by DCing. So, you know, that's not like the most uncommon thing you'll see in an invasion showcase for something like this weapon, just because people really don't like it, and especially if your Phantom that's supposed to be protecting you has like 800 HP, it can be a little bit difficult to, you know, justify hanging around in an invasion like that. So things aren't really working out on this platform, so I decided to jump over to the other side, and we do have, you know, Bolt of Grand Sacks coming our way, which is gonna add a lot of pressure and make our jobs quite a bit harder, because it takes away some of the potential opportunities we have to land our attacks, and we really need to be just kind of listening for that particular Ash of War to queue up so we know when to roll. And here I kind of patiently begin shooting my opponent with a bunch of Golem arrows, so definitely kind of keeping them on their toes, being fully locked and loaded with the bow, and then waiting until you can kind of time it with their roll sequence will definitely help you out. So we're able to knock that Phantom off the edge with the Great Bow and then land a couple hits to take care of the host. So next up we have another 3v1, and this one was a little bit interesting. There was a ton of Bloodhound Step, so you can see that almost immediately just as a defensive maneuver from the host, and it is pretty difficult to play against a player like that, especially when they're not just using it to kind of run in, they're using it like almost at random. It can be a little bit easier to just kind of assume that they're going to use Bloodhound Step and then attack you, because you just delay your attack until after you think that they're going to Bloodhound Step. But in this case, this player was kind of all over the place with it, and it was really hard to find a rhyme or reason, or if they were even actually trying to be offensive or defensive. So we do get a blue that comes into the world, and I'm not sure if they like were unfamiliar with this area, but they made some kind of strange decisions in how they navigated this area. So first they run towards the Crystallians, which are some of the most dangerous PvE in the game if you're not prepared to kind of poise break them and kill them, and then they run off towards more PvE and just kind of leave the host completely on their own. So I begin a chase down on the blue, and they go into a fairly risky area to be in, and I think they're trying to bait me, you know, onto this branch, but it doesn't really work, and then they accidentally roll off. So Again, strange choices by this blue, maybe not familiar with the area, might have been a fat roll just there, so really just, wasn't totally sure what was going on. Here, I'm not sure how that arrow didn't connect, but this time I'm ready to go and do manage to knock them off the branch, and we can kind of continue our pressure on the host now that we took care of that blue. So we head back towards the Site of Grace, and at this point, I do believe the host was trying to resummon, so we will be seeing the Phantom from earlier, and we do have another blue that has joined us in the world. So a lot of players in this particular invasion, and a lot of Bloodhound Step as we see this blue coming in with the dual whip setup as well as Bloodhound Step. So, it can be difficult to apply your damage when you do see that many iframes just kind of throughout the course of an invasion, but we do manage to frame trap them a little bit, get off quite a bit of damage, but the host does come in with some aggression, and an odd choice to just kind of sprint at me and hope that they kill me from the blue, and I'm able to send Unblockable Blade their direction and manage to get the last bit of HP from the blue, and that's kind of just in time because the other Phantom comes back into the world. I land a couple of L1s and force them to kind of retreat, and they're using Cypher Pedo, which is kind of like the Coated Swords, but definitely a little bit worse, and I'm able to take care of the host and then the Phantom as well in the last couple seconds there. So you can kind of just understand why people hate this weapon a little bit. It's just absurd, and it does make invading quite a bit easier. So if you are looking for an easier way to invade, just kind of like an absolutely overpowered, borderline broken setup, like this is definitely your ticket. The fact that you're running a Faith build means that you have access to incantations that are also borderline broken. I mean, all the defensive spells, or incantations rather, are being able to negate 40% of your opponent's physical damage or, magic damage, like that's just, very, very strong. So this was this was an easy one for me to make and just kind of a fun one to try once, and I don't plan on coming back to it anytime soon. So here we're hanging out at Ganker's Lagoon, and we don't have a ton of pressure from either Phantom, and the host just kind of gets caught up in the mix. And we do have a little bit of time here at the end to kill one Phantom, and then we're hoping to get the extra pressure on the other Phantom, but they don't really run towards me, so it doesn't end up being a difference maker there, but we do come out with the W nonetheless. Next up, we have another 3v1, and we do see some Moonveil in the mix, so we put on Barrier of Gold pretty early on here, and then begin the chase down, and do manage to click the Phantom there just as they're kind of like running down. I believe the host kind of got in their way. I'm not totally sure why I was running Sleep Pots at this build, at this point rather. Sleep is a little bit unnecessary for these weapons, but they are a nice way to complete a chase down. So if you are able to sleep, your opponent that's running down the hallway, and especially in the pipes where it's close quarters, it's hard to get away from that AoE, sleep can be extremely useful. So I don't use it that often, but for whatever reason in this invasion I had it on hand and thought I would incorporate it a little bit. And we do get a couple quick attacks on this Phantom, and you'll note that they aren't running too much poise. So the fact that their poise is low is really going to put us in a good spot to stance break them. And here they're inside the sleep for just a little bit too long, and we're able to get them slept, deliver 2 L1s, and then follow it up with a running L1 that kind of completes the finish on that opponent. And now, as kind of we wind down in our last invasion for this showcase, we just kind of go for a chase down on the host. They weren't playing too aggressively. They did have that flail that does just a massive AoE and can do quite a bit of damage, so I'm not really sure why they didn't go for that Ash of War. They begin fat rolling, and I just kind of slow down a little bit and deliver that final hit. If you made it this far in the video, thanks so much for watching, and if you skipped ahead just to see the build, this is what we're going to be dealing with. So we do have Millicent's Prosthesis on hand, which is going to boost our successive attacks, which is really helpful since we're going to land quite a few attacks in a row with this particular setup. We also have the option to switch over to Shard of Alexander to boost our Ashes of War, and the Claw Talisman is also a great option since jumping attacks are, very much a part of the playstyle for this setup. We do have the Bullgoat Talisman as well, and I definitely recommend 103 Poise or over 100, just so that you can, win out on a lot of trades and not get stance broken. Being able to kind of spam the L1 button is, very much a part of the playstyle for the coated swords. So that's definitely important. And then we have Crimson Hammer Medallion +2 to boost our HP, the Great Jar's Arsenal, so we can carry everything, and then as I mentioned, the Bulgo Talisman. We'll be running the Holy Shrouding Crack tier rather than the Faith tier, just because that's going to boost our holy damage, and when we already have pretty high faith, the scaling is kind of diminishing returns at this point. So we'll use that tier as well as the Crimson Bubble tier, and that's just going to restore our HP when we get close to death. It is also worth noting that the Haligtree Knight Helm is going to boost our faith by 2, so that's a nice way to increase our faith just a little bit more, and then it goes very well with the Tree Sentinel armor. This is a very common setup you might see for meta-based builds, so we're just going to kind of go really lean into it here and kind of look the part, if that makes sense. As for our incantations, I did put Wrath of Gold on this, but didn't really use it too much, so can't strongly recommend it over the raw damage that you get from the dual coated swords. I also have Golden Vow, which is going to increase our attack and defense, which is, a great way to start an invasion. Barrier of Gold is going to be extremely helpful, especially if you're encountering mages in an invasion context. And then Black's Flame Protection is going to negate some physical damage. So if you have a group of 3 and everybody is using some, physical damage type weapons, that's going to be very helpful. Lord's Divine Fortification, also going to be helpful if you see a lot of holy damage coming your way. And then Bestial Vitality as well as Great Heal. Erdtree's Heal would also be a good option if you're going for healing stuff, but these 2 were sufficient for this build in my opinion. If you have any questions about the build or have any recommendations about future builds that you'd like to see, definitely let me know. I'd be happy to take a look at those. And that's all I've got, so I hope you have a good one.